Greetings fellow Mistwanderers, my name is Steve Morgan and this is DM of the Mists, covering all things Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. Usually I don't do this straight away, but I'll do it now. There's spoilers in this for Curse of Strahd, for players in active Curse of Strahd games. I can understand a player maybe looking up one of these things because maybe you've just found it in the game that you're currently in. Please understand these videos are, for the most part, if not entirely, intended for Curse of Strahd DMs, not for players. What you could do is pass it on to your DM, let your DM see it, and they might be able to say, yeah, you can watch this part fine, or something like that. But yes, there's warnings in this for stuff that can be found in Curse of Strahd, so please be careful. And this video is all about what are called the Tarokka treasures. There's 3 of them. They are found in different parts of Barovia depending on how the Tarokka card reading goes. If you want more general information about the Tarokka reading, I did a dedicated video all about that, doing some example demo draws, talking about alternative ways people do it and stuff like that. But the 3 items are the Tome of Strahd, which isn't a magic item, it's just an item, I guess, but it's not a magical item, but it's still very important for the story and can really help the players out. The Holy Symbol of Ravenkind and the Sunsword. Those latter 2 are magic items. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to talk about all 3 of them. I'm going to sort of almost run through what it says in the book for each of them. But then I'm also going to talk about things to bear in mind, things that you might want to change, and some things I've seen where people have homebrewed it in the Curse of Strahd community, community mods, things like that, just in case you want to tweak it or make some changes and things like that. Let's get started with the Tome of Strahd. This is Strahd's diary, his journal, and it says in the book, I'm looking at a screen over here, Tome of Strahd is an ancient work penned by Strahd, a tragic tale of how he came to his fallen state. The book is bound in a thick leather cover with steel hinges and fastenings. The pages are of parchment and very brittle. Most of the book is written in the curious shorthand that only Strahd employs. Stains and age have made most of the work legible, but several paragraphs remain intact and readable. If the characters acquire the Tome of Strahd and want to read these paragraphs, show them from the Tome of Strahd section in Appendix F. If Strahd sees or learns from a minion that the tome has fallen into the party's possession, all of his other objectives from Chapter 1 are put on hold until the book is recovered. When Strahd attacks, his preferred target is whoever has the tome. And I won't read out the From the Tome of Strahd excerpt out word for word, but it essentially explains how he came to Barovia and how he was a general, called for his family to come to Castle Ravenloft, talks about Sergei and his hatred for him, his jealousy, his meeting Tatiana, how he was spurned and she fell in love with Sergei, and then how he made his pact sealed with his blood and killed his own brother, and about how Tatiana flung herself from the walls of Ravenloft and fell to the mists, but no trace of her was ever found, and about how the guards tried to attack Strahd, but he did not die, nor did he live. He was undead forever. Gives little clues about vampirism, obviously says about the sun. Interesting how it says, even a stake through my heart does not kill me, it holds me from movement, in case players think of the classic, oh, we'll stake people and it'll kill them instantly, like in Buffy the Vampire Slayer or something. It's not how it works in D&D. And then the cursed sword that Sergei brought, I must dispose of it. I fear and hate it as much as the sun. So it's cool little things there that players can pick up on and learn about Strahd. Oh, I've often hunted for Tatiana, and I sleep beneath the very stones of the castle. I still shut the walls of the stairs. So things like, when they find Strahd's bedroom later on, his bedroom is not actually his proper sleeping place. That's obviously his coffin in the crypts. And I see discussions online where people say, oh, is that it? It's a bit disappointing. In fact, one of my players actually said that. They were like, oh, is that it? We thought we'd do more. But this is really good, handy, useful information, and it's great in the final battle. If you're playing Strahd, he's an intelligent dude, he's a general, he's a tactician, but if you start doing things where the players start doing things where they're taunting him, like when I was a player in Curse of Strahd before DMing it, my human fighter said something when he kept phasing through walls. I was like, this is very brave. I bet Tatiana thinks you're such a brave man. And I don't know if my DM did this on purpose or not, but my DM then focused all the attacks on me, and my human fighter soon got KO'd. But it gave my fellow players and characters, PCs, an opening to attack him back, and he was sort of a bit more clumsy with his tactics. So that's a great way to do it, because a lot of people say, well, Strahd is invincible unless you nerf him or let him stand in the middle of a room, which isn't great. But the tome gives information to the players that they can use against him and, you know, taunt him with, and I think that's something that sometimes gets overlooked. If Strahd does get hold of it, where would he put it? I think the perfect place would be the study in the castle. Makes sense because it's a room full of books and he puts his book in there. If the study is, say, his Tarokka location, which was the case in my game when I DM'd it, maybe he puts it in his coffin instead or somewhere else. I've seen some people go as far as to gift their players a copy of Strahd, Memoirs of a Vampire, which is sort of like the pre-5th edition novel version of the Tome of Strahd, where it talks about how he makes his pact and how he came to the valley. Sergei arrived, he met Tatiana and eventually made his pact and everything that happened on their wedding day. Warning, if you do that, it's a really cool idea, is obviously it doesn't line up with the 5th edition Curse of Strahd version of events. For example, there's a character called Alec Gwillem, not to be confused with Sir Godfrey Gwillem, which I think is obviously like supposed to be a nod to Alec. But also there's no Rahadin. Rahadin is a 5th edition invention, I think. So if you do that and your players will be like, who's this Alec guy and where's Rahadin? And so, I don't know. There's minor complications you may have to deal with. There is the interactive Tome of Strahd, which you can consider running in conjunction with one of your players fighting the tome. I discovered the interactive Tome of Strahd soon after my players discovered the Tome of Strahd. I'm sure I could have wrangled it maybe the next time they opened it to do the interactive Tome of Strahd, but I was gutted because I just thought, oh, that's such a cool idea. And it is essentially, like, I haven't had an in-depth look at it, that's going to be a future video, but it's essentially a bit like Tom Riddle's diary in Harry Potter, and the players kind of observe the past events from the Tome of Strahd and can participate in them and things like that. Some people, because of for those who find it underwhelming, and it's the fact it's not a magic item, they might give it some abilities, some spells. I did see in one of the threads I was looking at while researching this video that somebody linked to homebrew options on D&D Beyond. In the D&D Beyond homebrew section, there's dozens, I think, of versions of the Tome of Strahd where people have turned it into a magic item. So that might be worth digging through if you want to do the same, and then you can maybe allow your players to have that. And so that, especially if you've got, say, like 3 players and you've got a cleric and a paladin, so they'll get like the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind and the Sunsword, and then you've got a 3rd player who gets the Tome of Strahd. They're like, oh, great. You know, that might be an idea for them, so they're not left out. Oh, and I should have said this earlier when I was talking about the tome more generally. Make sure you keep tabs on who actually has the tome. In my game, full confession, I knew one of my players had it, but I don't think I was very strict in saying, right, which one of you actually has this and has it in your inventory. And I lost track. So the whole thing about how Strahd targets that player, it's good for you to know, so that if you do get in a situation where Strahd finds out, Strahd wants it back, he knows which player to target and retrieve the tome from. Next up, the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind. It's a wondrous item, legendary, requires attunement by a cleric or paladin of good alignment. We'll come back to that in a moment. So I won't talk through all of the lore about it, delivered to a paladin by a giant raven or maybe an angel, but let's talk about what it can do. Holy Symbol, 10 charges, regains 1d6 plus 4 daily at dawn. And the 3 things it can do are hold vampires. As an action, you can expend 1 charge and present the Holy Symbol to make it flare with holy power. Vampires and vampires spawn within 30 feet of the Holy Symbol when it flares must make a DC 15 Wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, target is paralyzed for 1 minute. It can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns to end the effect of itself. So hugely detrimental, not even talking about the 3rd point, which I'll get to in a minute, hugely detrimental to vampires, spawn and Strahd potentially. Strahd obviously has his legendary resistances. I did a whole other video, I won't talk too much about it here, I did a whole other video talking about final battle tactics depending on where he is in the castle, and I talk about him using his legendary resistances. He will want to save his legendary resistances for this if he needs to, because if he gets paralyzed for up to 1 minute, that could be bad. But the cool thing is, say if the players fight Doru, and it's a struggle, and then the players later go to the Vallaki coffin shop, and that's a real struggle because there's 6 vampire spawn, and then they get hold of the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind, and then they find maybe a random encounter with vampire spawn, or fight the brides somewhere, the consorts, or the nest in the Amber Temple. It completely changes the tide of the battle if they can then press this button. Essentially, it's not a button, you know what I mean. And, you know, half are safe, half of them fail the saving throw, then half of them are paralyzed for at least 1 turn. You know, and then potentially more so if they keep failing the save. That's huge, and that can really change the tide of the battle. Turn Undead. If you have the Turn Undead or the Turn the unholy feature, you can expend 3 charges when you present the holy symbol while using that feature. When you do so, undead have disadvantage on the saving throws against the effect. Now, my player, who is a wizard who multiclassed into cleric in order to use this, we got confused by an element of this. She thought it meant that... There's a noisy bird outside. She thought it meant that she could use 3 charges and use turn undead through the holy symbol and then keep her character's turn undead slots for another time. But the wording makes me think that you, say if you can use turn undead twice, depending on your level, that you use it once and you use 3 charges of the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind. So it's really fitting at the moment. I don't know if you can hear that. There's like a bird cooing outside. I don't know if it's a pigeon or something, but we're talking about the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind. I hope it's a raven. It won't be because ravens go caw caw and it's not cawing. Where was I? Yes, so that caught us out. Make sure you don't do the same. So they got the option to either just use turn undead as normal or turn undead as normal plus 3 charges of the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind, and then the people have disadvantage on saving throws. And the third one, sunlight. And we all know, or should know, that Barovian sunlight isn't actually sunlight for the purposes of vulnerability for vampires, and then also if you've got, I suppose, drow PCs or kobold PCs, I think, as well, that have sunlight sensitivity. Sunlight, as an action, you can spend 5 charges while presenting the holy symbol to make it shed bright light in a 30-foot radius and dim light for an additional 30 feet, so up to 60 feet. The light is sunlight and lasts for 10 minutes or until you end the effect, no action required. And let me just double check something. This is further than the Sunsword. No, the Sunsword can be up to a maximum of 30 bright, 30 dim, but you've by default it's 15-15 and you can increase it by 5 feet as a bonus, as an action. So yeah, we'll talk about that later when I talk about the Sunsword. But yeah, even though the Sunsword can reach that far, the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind just does it. That's how far it stretches. More effective in that regard, I guess, if distance is an issue, such as Strahd trying to keep out of the radius of sunlight. While I'm on this point, I've seen differing discussions online about what happens if, say, the person who's attuned to the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind dies while the sunlight is active, because it says it lasts up to 10 minutes. Does it continue for 10 minutes, or does it stop the moment the person is killed? I asked this question on Reddit ages ago, which I won't link to because the comments were very patronising, or at least I thought so. A lot of people said, well, it says that it lasts for 10 minutes, so it lasts for 10 minutes. But I'm sure there's some sort of higher up, and this is 2014 rules now, can't speak for 2024, but some sort of higher up rule that says if you die, you lose attunement and it stops doing what it's doing. And then I saw a later discussion by somebody else where all the people seemed to say, oh yeah, if the person's killed, the sun stops shining. And I think I left a comment saying, oh, I was told the opposite. And then I got downvoted, which is quite funny. Kind of want to go back to those people who are patronising to me and go, ha. But anyway, sorry. I'm using this video as therapy, clearly. But yeah, so I'd love to see actually what people think when they weigh in. I was always under the suspicion that the sunlight would stop if the person was killed. But that's going to be a really important thing because it's in the middle of the battle and Strahd manages to take out whoever's using it and they're actually killed. You know, is it still shining up to 60 feet of sunlight? Strahd has to try and navigate that, or does it just switch off? And then Strahd can maybe just use a mage hand and lob it somewhere. If Strahd gets a hold of it, where would he put it? I think a good place would be Sergei's tomb, because I think it was in Strahd, it's actually in Sergei's possession. So it'd be fitting that he wants to kind of return it to his brother. He sees it as this like brother's thing. Another place could be the chapel, but perhaps that's a bit too easy to reach and easy to access. Let's talk about that class and alignment requirement. It said, and I quote, requires attunement by a cleric or paladin of good alignment. And I see discussions online quite regularly where someone says, well, I don't have a cleric or a paladin, or I have a cleric and a paladin, but they're not good alignment. I would hand wave it. Ideally, if you've got somebody that fits that role in the party, you should go to them. If you don't have anyone, then I would just maybe let someone have it. One option could be multi-classing, which is what happened in my game. We did have a paladin later on, but at the time they found it, they didn't have a cleric or a paladin, so my wizard was like, oh, I'll take 11 cleric and job done. And I think they weren't even good alignment, I think they were neutral, but I still let them use it anyway as a neutral wizard/cleric. Another option I've seen people say online is they could give it to an NPC, such as someone who can cast cleric spells, such as Rudolf van Richten or Donovich, especially if one of those two ends up being the fated ally. But It's a bit of a downside that you get this really cool toy and then give it to an NPC and the NPC uses it, unless they really don't like the idea of using it or the hassle of using it, or they want this NPC to use it because it'll help them to, they give it to Van Richten, say he's the ally, Van Richten uses it, and then they know that they can do their attack. Instead of using their action to activate Hold Vampires or Sunlight, they can use their actions to, attack the vampire spawn while they're already paralyzed. So I don't know, I guess it depends on what your players are like. One thing I came across that's kind of buried away in Mandymod's resources on Reddit, under the Fanes Part 2 post, she talks about how she gave the symbol some additional abilities. I think she said she remodeled them. So I think maybe that some of these replace some of the other ones, because I think Sunlight is still there, maybe replace the other two. But I like the idea. What I did in my game, I'm playing like a post-Curse of Strahd Wider Ravenloft game. Long story short, they found out about the Druid Circle just outside the village of Barovia, which doesn't appear in Curse of Strahd, but is mentioned in Vampire of the Mists, that novel, the one with Janda Sunstar. They took it there, and they kind of almost like reconsecrated it, if that makes sense. And then it earned these two extra abilities in addition to Hold Vampires, Turn Undead and Sunlight. Mental Barrier. Anyone who wears the Symbol of Ravenkind gains the benefit of a non-detection spell and is immune to psychic damage. As an action, the wearer can expend 2 charges to project this effect in a 15-foot radius around themselves, protecting any other creature within range. This effect lasts for 1 hour. Cool. And the other thing it does, and this is really cool, Raven's Eye. As an action, you can expend 3 charges to magically summon 1d4 swarms of ravens to aid you in combat. When combat ends, the summoned ravens burst into feathers and disappear. So my players have used that one a few times. My wizard/cleric who still plays in my game, who is attuned to the Holy Symbol. In battles where they feel a bit outmatched, she, the player, he, the character, will use that and summon up to 1d4 swarms of ravens, and I kind of have them on a separate map ready so I can just copy paste them in, on Roll20 I should say. So yeah, it can be quite cool to have those abilities. So in their version, there's kind of like an adapted version, amended version of the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind. It can do 5 things, not 3. So I thought that was quite cool. I'll link to that Mandymod resource in the description, by the way, so if you're trying to look for it. Like I said, it's quite buried, quite hard to find. I struggled to re-find it when I wanted it for this video, but look for it in the description. And lastly, the Sunsword. A legendary longsword weapon, requires attunement. Again, I won't go through the whole lore thing, but one thing that's really important is that, and I've seen this trip people up, it's probably obvious if you know, but I've seen some people say, oh, I don't know, what its stats do? What like extra bonus does it do? And they overlook the fact that it is basically a Sunblade plus this other stuff. So look at the Sunblade and then add this stuff to it. If you overlook that, then I can understand if you think, oh, the only thing it does is have sentience and personality. But the Sunblade says that it's got a +2 to attack rolls and damage rolls, plus 1d8 radiant damage if you hit them dead with it, plus the light is sunlight, and talks about expanding and retracting it. So the sentient side of things. Sentient chaotic good weapon, hearing and vision, normal vision out to a range of 60 feet. Weapon communicates by transmitting emotions to the creature carrying or wielding it. And the personality, its special purpose is to destroy Strahd. Not so much because it wants to free the land of Barovia from evil, but because it wants revenge for the loss of its crystal blade. The weapon secretly fears its own destruction. Proficiency with the longsword allows you to add your proficiency bonus to the attack roll for any attack you make with it. Plus, the Sunblade has the finesse property, which means if you're proficient with Sunswords or longswords, you are proficient with the Sunblade/Sunsword. So that's important as well, because I've seen some people say, oh, none of my players are proficient with longswords. They don't have to be. So long as they're proficient with a short sword, they can still use it. If Strahd gets a hold of it, where does he put it? Well, this is a trickier one. I don't think he'd put it in Sergei's crypt. I think this one would probably go in the treasury. It's his sort of mini Fort Knox, hard to get into. He'd probably want to lock that up tight so that the PCs can't get to it. An interesting thing I've seen is people say, because it's sentient, is it Sergei? And the answer is no. It does specify that it's Sergei's sword. And also Sergei, if you're doing this thing, Sergei's soul is in the pool in Kresk, and there's the whole Something Blue event that some DMs don't like, where Irina may or may not go into it. I won't bore you with that. If you know, you know. I kind of like the idea that maybe echoes Sergei and kind of is Sergei-ish, or makes the players think it's kind of like Sergei, but even though it's not Sergei, without it actually being Sergei. I mean, it was Sergei was the wielder, and therefore they had a tie to Sergei, but I wouldn't say that it is Sergei's soul in the sword, because that could confuse things. I'd say as well, aside from the whole thing I mentioned a minute ago about the long sword, short sword proficiency, you might have a party of magic casters, nobody wants to use a sword. Even if no one wants to use a sword, just use it as like a glorified torch. You know, in the Strahd battle, someone just holds it up and Strahd's going to struggle to get near them because they'd have to go into the sunlight to do that, or just do ranged attacks from a distance. So even if they don't want to use a sword, they can just use it that way, and that's still a huge help. I think it'd be a shame if they were like, oh, none of us want to use this, so we're not going to use it. Like, are you mad? Like, you know, it's crucial, really important, or really good way to take down Strahd. Use it. Another example, like talking about before, the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind, is give it to an NPC such as Esmeralda. But again, a PC should be wielding that, not an NPC, otherwise it's a shame. A really cool thing I came across, a comment in a post when I was researching this video, I'll share the link in the description, is after Curse of Strahd, the book Fizban's Treasury of Dragons came out, which I've got access to, and there's a crystal blade, magic item in that. And some people said, oh, what if that's what Sergei's sword was before it got destroyed and became the Sunsword, or if it's reforged. So if the players decide after, you know, maybe it's a sequel campaign, defeat Strahd, and they find the opportunity they can reforge it. That could be quite cool, and they can reforge it as a crystal blade. And then maybe it keeps its sentience as well. I think the Sunsword is probably more effective, especially if you're doing a Ravenloft campaign, but could be something to consider. And in my game, one of the players who didn't stick around after Curse of Strahd had that. I had a Tabaxi fighter in my group, and she was a player who left at the end of Curse of Strahd, didn't continue with my wider Ravenloft campaign. I lost a couple of players at that point. And so that Tabaxi fighter took the Sunblade with them, and that was it. So rode off into the sunset. So in my current game, my 3 remaining players' PCs only have access to the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind. But what I've got planned is the end game of my campaign, or this arc of the campaign, is going to be in Darkon. And Darkon's secret police are vampires. And so one of the Keepers of the Feather will say that they visited an old friend on the Sword Coast who's no longer fighting vampires and wanted to give you this. And they hand the Sunsword, so that one of my players, if they wanted, I got a paladin in the group who could work well for them, or if, you know, they give it to an NPC, because they've already got a lot of cool magic items. The paladin actually has a vorpal sword already, then they might, you know, for the purposes of fighting off the vampires, they've got the Sunsword back. And I want to end off as well with, what if you're not running Curse of Strahd, but you want to incorporate these items? Well, we'll ignore the Tome of Strahd, because that's null, that's basically a Curse of Strahd Barovia item. And I want to say the same with the Sunsword as well, because its lore is so heavily tied to Sergei and Strahd and all of that. And then you'd argue as well, how did it get out of Barovia if Barovia's borders are closed? Maybe incorporate a Sunblade, but maybe have it not be the Sunsword. The Holy Symbol of Ravenkind, though, there's a few things you can do here. So there's one of the pieces of art in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft shows the members of the Keepers of the Feather holding it, which is quite cool. And in the trinkets table as well, one of the items says that it's, you know, it describes what it is. And it's up to you if you want that to be the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind and go, here you go, you got this now. Or it could be a knockoff, it could be a fake. Looks just like the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind, but isn't actually the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind. But as I mentioned a minute ago, it could be handy in Darkon fighting the Kharjat, both the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind and a Sunblade. So if you're doing a Ravenloft campaign that may or may not swing by Barovia, that could be a way to incorporate it. Shout out for one of my DM's Guild resources. I've got one called the Second Tarokka Reading. It's called the Second Tarokka Reading because the first Tarokka Reading is Madame Eve's and Curse of Strahd. So it's intended as a Curse of Strahd sequel campaign, if you carry on after Curse of Strahd with the same characters. But you could have it where just the players have it as their first and only Tarokka Reading, and when you choose magic items for the different players, you could have one of them be a Sunblade and one of them be the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind, and it could be in any of the Domains of Dread listed in Van Richten's Guide, Major or Minor. I say Major, for those not familiar with the book, Major is some of the domains have like multiple pages and a map, and then some just have like a couple of paragraphs, but I've covered all bases if you want to check it out. I think in the preview you can get a glimpse of what some of the clues and domains are, but that could be a cool way to incorporate it and lead the players to it, that they know that this powerful, you know, vampire destroying item can be found, and then maybe they've got to go to Darkon and fight the Kharjat, and that's going to be a really big help to them. And that's it for this one. So I hope it's useful to people. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. Got a lot of Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft video ideas ready, but I record these videos on my phone. Whee, hello. And Oh, my notes are on my phone, and I don't want to play around and disturb my phone, but there's the Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft playlists you can check out if you haven't, if you're new to the channel, if this is my first video. I talk about all sorts of things related to Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. Trying to remember the Curse of Strahd ones. I do want to do a video at some point that's just all about Strahd, how to roleplay him, things like that. And I'm kind of nervous about putting it out there because I want to be useful to people, but if enough people shout loud enough, I might prioritise that. On Ravenloft front, I'm currently running the domain dread called Haslan, and there will be a video soon, maybe in a few weeks' time, maybe longer, where I talk about how I ran Haslan. I want to do, in the meantime, things like good NPCs you can add, a good align in terms of alignment. I already did one of these videos, but I want to do a second one, and more evil, non-Dark Lord recurring PCs, villains, that you can add to a Ravenloft campaign as well. In the first video, some of them were from Curse of Strahd, and I think one or two of what are going to be in the part 2 are tied to Barovia. I don't want to say too much, so they might be usable for people who, even if you're not running Ravenloft campaign, you're running Curse of Strahd, might still be useful to you. And we leave it there. Thank you, Mist Wanderers.